Again, thank you everybody for joining us tonight. Let me go ahead and really quickly introduce our speaker tonight. Thank you, Irene, for joining us tonight. 2 hours, she's 2 hours later, so it's a little bit late her time, but she said she's anxious still to present this late in the night for her. So it's Irene Hinke Sacilotto. I think I pronounced that right.
Good.
Uh, There you go. Let's see here. Since the early 80s, Irene Sacilotto has shared her photographs, experiences, and love of nature with thousands of individuals through more than 300 photo classes, workshops, lectures, tours in both the US and abroad, including Kenya, Iceland, Newfoundland, Falkland Islands, Brazilian Panhandle.
That's an L.
That's right. I'm reading it, but not
That's all right.
accurately. South Dakota Badlands, Bosque del Apache. This is one I'll struggle with. Chincoteague.
Hinke.
There you go. Um,
That's
Temple.
nearby.
I should have read this more carefully earlier. At least got the
That's all right. And you don't have to do all the detail.
Tangier Islands. Uh, she has many program sponsors, including zoos, nature centers, camera clubs, universities, conservation organizations such as National Wildlife Federation, and uh, uh, here we go again, Santiago
Assateague.
Alliance. I'm
It's
gonna, I will
they're
get these things right.
Eastern Indian tribes.
There you
Eastern
go.
Native American is where the Chincoteague and the Assateague came from. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Written many how-to articles, and I won't go through all of these ones, but Shutterbug, outdoor nature photography, outdoor photographer, and birding. Images have appeared in magazines, calendars, books published by National Wildlife Federation, Natural History Society, National Geographic. Publishing credits include her book. There we go again.
There you go again. Chincoteague National Wildlife Refuge, an ecological treasure.
There you go. Thank you for chiming in on that part of it.
That's all right.
So, but anyways, again, a lot as while my pronunciations may have been inaccurate, she has many credentials and many things that she's been published in and that. So we're really looking forward to seeing today's presentation that actually is on flower photography primarily, but share whatever else you would like to share too.
I just have above here, if you ever want to look at my website, it's ospreyphoto.com. I produce a newsletter about every 2 months. It's free. And you can sign up on that page. You can see, anyway, I've got a gallery there, my schedule. I do photo workshops and tours, so that schedule happens to be there. And again, here we are. Some of the places that I've been going, Newfoundland, West Virginia mountains, both southern and northern, Chincoteague, Assateague Island, Tangier is another place in the middle of the Chesapeake Bay, Outer Banks, etc. If the Outer Banks is still there after this weekend. Anyhow, and I do small group photo workshops. So it's like 6, 8 people, and the one I do in Newfoundland is just 3 people. I'm going to talk about potential subjects. It's going to be a little wider range than maybe you thought. It's not just going to be a flower. We're going to talk about some gardens and some other places that you see flowers that you might be able to take advantage of, composition, lighting, some of the problems that you run into and solutions, close-up accessories, filters, a couple creative ideas, I hope, and a little bit on focus stacking. And potential subjects can be anywhere. Neighborhood gardens, formal gardens. I went to Scandinavia, and Scandinavia is really big on some formal gardens, so I brought a couple shots from there. You can buy flowers and do a setup at your own house. There are some scenes with fields with flowers. So this is going a little further. I said it was garden and flower photography. Leaves, buds, seed pods, ferns, insects, wildlife could be in your garden. I have a Longwood Gardens is one of the places that I go to that's about an hour and a half from here. It's a really spectacular garden, and so is Norfolk Botanical Gardens. But you'll find some critters there and a little bit on water features and getting some ideas from that. I mentioned when I first came on, was talking, Bruce, that I go to the Y, and every day when I came out, I'd see these nice sunflowers blooming. But this is taken with a cell phone, by the way, but I take the cell phone out and I look around for some angles and about 2 days ago, I found my flower, and I found the situation, and I love the curve, and I love the we'll say fur on it, but anyway, and the backlighting and so forth. And so you can find subjects to photograph anywhere if you're just walking down. This is from Oslo, but just wandering around the streets of Oslo, and I found some beautiful flowers overhead. You can be just driving along the road. I was heading down to that horrible place that you mentioned, Chincoteague or Assateague, and along that road I happened to see a field of sunflowers, and I stopped the car and took the pictures. So you don't just have to be doing things in the garden. This is in Denmark, northern Denmark. I just did this year, and I hate to say it, but I don't know what these are, and we never did figure out what they were. But it was a beautiful, beautiful scene with these beautiful yellow flowers in the foreground with different photographs. You can photograph buds. You can photograph, this happens to be a lotus. It's a seed pod from a lotus blossom. You can do ferns. Lots of times in some of the parks and gardens, you have ferns. And a lot of the places, you'll have just different displays from tropical displays and whatever, and you get some really interesting leaves. And so I enjoy trying to find some interesting patterns and colors and so forth with something like this. This one's just really weird. It looks like it's very three-dimensional. It's got some shadows and tonal gradients, and it gives it a real three-dimensional feel. But I have fun playing around with whatever, the palm frond. That looks explosive. It's different. So I don't just concentrate when I go to a garden just on the flowers. This guy was taken in Shenandoah National Park in Virginia. And anyway, I like water droplets. Sometimes you can get them just from morning dew. That's what this was. It could have rained and you have some nice water droplets. Some people spray their flowers. I don't do this, but with glycerin mixed with water can make for an interesting shot. I like water droplets, particularly when they hang on leaves. This is a lotus leaf. So you can get some interesting patterns, etc. All right, so it's dead, and but I still have fun with things like that. Going into some of the gardens, there are displays, etc. This happened to be, it just caught my interest. It's in Loudoux. It's a topiary garden. But at the entrance, they had these chairs, and they were metal chairs, and they were faces. And so I took advantage of that. So I take advantage of whatever I might find in a garden. It doesn't just have to be flowers. This was from Norfolk Botanical Gardens. It almost looks like it was a shot that was taken from a drone, but it's really a wall. Yeah, Longwood Gardens also has a special wall with various plants. One of the things that's important when you do something like this is to keep the face of the lens parallel to the face of the surface that you're photographing, and I'll mention that again later. Uh, Europe has a lot of formal gardens. This is King's Garden in Copenhagen. This is Tivoli Garden, and it's an amusement park, also in Copenhagen. So wherever I find flowers and plants, I try to take advantage, and I like the path kind of leading the way up to that. Looks like it's kind of a fun amusement swing there. This is from Newfoundland. I love lupin. And so if I see a field of lupin, I try to figure out different ways that I can photograph it. In this case, I used it to frame the town here, which is a historic town called Trinity. Parks in Europe and elsewhere, you can have just fields of tulips and so forth with a variety of colors. And this was on my way to shoot some puffins, and I was driving down the road, and all of a sudden I saw this beautiful collection of flowers. It didn't last real long, but the purples and the white flowers were just really gorgeous. And so I took time to take a number of photographs of this particular scene. And then a lot of gardens have water features. They have some kind of reflecting pool. Uh, so I try to look for places where you've got some beautiful colors kind of mixed in patterns and try to get a sharp image of the surface of the water. This was at Loudoux Gardens. It was near a fountain, but it was a really cool pattern. And then you've got other things like Longwood Gardens has fountains. This happened to be at Norfolk Botanical Gardens, but I like the backlighting. I like the slow shutter speed with it. So you've got a variety of things. This is a crazy thing that I'll never get again, but this was inside Longwood Gardens. It was inside the conservatory, and they had a wall with water flowing. And I happened to notice the lady and the child. And then I took a chance and got this photograph, which is a little bit different. In gardens, you got other subjects. You could have turtles. Definitely, there's a place called Lily Ponds. Unfortunately, it just closed. It was a place where you could buy lilies and lotus and a number of terrestrial flowers as well. And the ponds just were loaded with frogs. And if I got in early, they'd let me actually get down in the ponds and take some of the pictures. It's important, whatever you have, an animal or bug, to get the eye sharp. If the eye isn't sharp, you're not going to be happy with the picture. The rest of the picture is going to look like there's something wrong with it. I was sitting in a restaurant and I happened to see the Stellar Jay running around outside in a garden, and it was in the Canadian Rockies. So I grabbed the picture. And you can get turtles and so forth. You can get bees. You can get cool spiders. You can get butterflies. And in a number of gardens now, Norfolk, I know Ladue have, and also down in South Florida, etc. Some of the gardens have butterfly houses now. And it's a great place to try to get pictures of some exotic butterflies as well as maybe some native butterflies. Again, keeping the eye sharp is something that's important. This shot, I had to be careful. I manually focused on the butterfly. I didn't use autofocus because the focus would have locked on other parts of this flower and not on the butterfly. So just some things to think about. Lots of times in those gardens, they also have the various stages of the butterflies, and in this, they happen to have the caterpillar. This is the back end of the caterpillar, but I like the picture because I like the diagonal, and I shot it that way on purpose. And you can have these fun things. My girlfriend has a pond and a little garden around the pond, and I get some opportunities to photograph dragonflies and damselflies. The neat thing about them is a couple things to keep in mind. One, they like to come back to the same spot over and over again, so you can be prepared for the shot. Number two, be careful as you shoot them to get all the features of the subject in sharp focus. In other words, put the face of the lens parallel to the features that you're trying to capture. Another thing, I'll talk later about different lenses and length of lenses and so forth, but if you can be further away from these guys, they're less likely to be disturbed, number one, and they're less likely to have your shadow fall on it. And that's something to keep in mind whenever you're photographing flowers and you're close. Watch out for your shadow. Often it'll either cover up part of the flower or it'll end up doing something to the background that you may not like. So longer lenses sometimes have a benefit. They give you more working space from your subject, and you don't have that problem. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. This is a horrible picture. It's a good example of absolutely no focus. I have no idea what, I think I may have just taken this just for this purpose, but I have no idea what the subject is. It's got busy, distracting backgrounds. It's got elements that are pulling you out of the frame. The lighting is horrible. It's harsh. The leaves are shiny. And that's not what you're looking for. What you're looking for is something it's simple. Outdoor issues. If you're outdoors, you have a couple things that can ruin your pictures. One of them, whether you're indoors or outdoors, you want to make sure you've got an appropriate depth of field to get all the features of the flower that you're interested in. If you have a real slow shutter speed and it happens to have a little bit of wind, you can have a problem with blurred images. Image stabilization is good if you're hand holding the camera. You want to put that on, but definitely breezes can be caused by people passing by. If you're close to the flower, it could be just a gentle breeze, just natural wind type breeze. I have done things when I've had a situation where it might be breezy outside. In South Texas, the wind seems like it always blows. And I've actually taken an umbrella that's, the shade is not colored, it's clear, and I've cut a slit in it. And bottom line is I created a screen, and you can buy things like this too, but a screen around the plant, and it blocked the wind so that I could shoot it. Or you could use some kind of other, say, take some plastic sheets and put them as a wind block. If you're this is particularly if I'm doing birds, but if you're on a boardwalk or some kind of platform or a bridge and you're maybe doing, say, something in the water, like a water lily, anybody that's walking on that boardwalk or whatever will create vibrations and can blur your pictures. Um, Hand holding a camera, they got a lot of easier time now because you've got that image stabilization, both if it's a mirrorless camera, it'll be both in the camera and in the lens itself. But you want to be careful, don't jerk the shutter release. You might want to put the camera on a tripod. We'll talk about the positives and negatives of that. Uh, and if you got it on a tripod, you might not want to touch the camera when you're firing the camera, but use a remote trigger or self timer. Wobbly tripods, you just forget them. In my wildlife classes and whatever, people will advise people to bring a tripod, but if it's one that's unsteady, they usually ended up putting in the trash before when they go home. And movement of water, like flowers that are in the water, like water lilies and lotus, if the water is moving, because maybe they've got circulation or whatever else, it can cause problems and blur your images. Indoors in conservatories or hothouses, you come across some problems that'll cause your images not to be sharp. Somebody comes from one room to the other, and a lot of these hothouses and whatever are divided into different rooms. Longwood has a big conservatory, and one room will be tropical plants, another room will be desert plants, and so forth. Somebody opening the door will usually create a little draft, and it'll cause your subject to move. Fan blowing, that's a biggie that can cause problems, and that Longwood is one of the places that I remember that I've had some problems with that. People passing by create a breeze. Um, Again, hand holding a lot of places don't allow tripods inside, so you're definitely going to be hand holding the lens, and you just want to make sure you're steady. This is a biggie. Temperature changes. I remember on more than one occasion I've had this problem. My friend reminded me of one. We went to it was an insectarium, and it was in Newfoundland, and they had a butterfly house. And we went from the air conditioned area into the butterfly house, which happened to be warm and moist. That can happen at Longwood Gardens. It's happened before where I'm going from cold outside and inside into the conservatory where there's high humidity. All of a sudden, the front of your lens, the camera, everything is covered in moisture. Your best thing to do is to place the camera. If you know you're going to do that, place the camera in your camera bag first and bring the camera bag into the location. Let the temperature warm up so that it's the same inside the bag as it is outside, and then pull out the camera. And you usually won't have the moisture on the front of your lens, which is not going to help your picture. And if you do get moisture in front of your lens, I find that the microfiber cloths only smear it around. So bring some lens tissue, the old type of paper lens tissue, and it'll soak up the water. Okay, lighting. Uh, just be aware that you're painting with light, basically, and it controls how your picture is going to look. If you have side light, you're going to have lighting that gives you some shadows, it gives you some tonal gradients, and it gives you a sense of three-dimensionality. Here, we have flat front light. It's not a bad picture, it's fine. Just be aware that the lighting affects how three-dimensional your image is going to appear. This is quite three-dimensional again with tonal gradients, shadows, etc. We've got it here with the cactus. You can see the light's coming from one side and it shows some of the shape. And they usually can make some more interesting and dramatic pictures. And a little bit of side lighting here too. It was soft. One thing I'll talk about, whether it's soft or harsh, but soft light helps maintain, see all the fine colors that you have. If you have really strong light, you'll lose those differences in those shades. Soft light here, it's calming, etc. I like soft light. And what happens if you have strong sunlight, you'll end up with these leaves back here catching the light and being a distraction in the background, and you want to control your backgrounds. So that worked really fine. If the background, if you're going to have some issues or whatever, or you want to really focus on one part of the flower, get closer. We've got a shallower depth of field. I'll talk about that in a little bit, but it makes that background go out. I made sure that I photographed and kept, oopsie, sorry. uh, kept things really focused sharply on these this part of the flower, the anther and stamens. Again, soft light is perfect for this image. If it was harsh, you'd have blown out colors. You wouldn't have all these subtle shades of pink as you do here and here. It's just a nicer appearance. This almost looks like a dancer. Also, if you have scenes that are wood scenes, the softer light, uh, light overcast, shade, uh, gives you a better image. I like the blue mixed with the orange. White flowers can be a problem. If it's a bright sunny day, it's not a good time to be shooting white flowers or any kind of, you're going to have a lot of problems with bright sunny days with the background being lit and sometimes the leaves being shiny and taking away from the subject. In the case of this, it's bunchberry, I believe it's a relative of dogwood. Um, to prevent having problems and to keep some of the detail, I ended up using I could wait for a nice light cloud to come over the sun. Um, that could work. I could come back on another day, or I might get out some kind of diffusion disc. You can get big ones, you can get little ones, and basically you're going to hold it over your subject, and it diffuses the light, it softens it, and it saves you from having those dark shadows, those bright highlights, burnt out areas on the picture. Let's see. I wish I had had one of those diffusers when I did this because I don't like the bright highlights. It's kind of an interesting picture, but I would have preferred a little softer light on it. I had no choice. Softening images, you can shoot through frosted glass. This was at Longwood, and it was some older glass that had ripples in it and so forth. And it made more of a painterly like image, but you can do things like this. For instance, you can blow, basically, you can fog your UV filter with your breath and create a softening image like this. You can do it in with your Photoshop also with some blur. The light affects how things feel to the touch. Just a comparison, this feels like velvety. If I wanted to touch it, that soft light is really nice for that. I have stronger light here with I like the dark background, which was shadow, but the stronger light brought out the colors, the vibrant colors, and you feel different about touching this. If you would touch it, it would feel slick or it's shiny, and it gives you a different feel with this light compared to the other. Backlight. Um, you can have rim light. Oopsie, sorry about that. It's bringing out the fuzz on the back of the columbine, and the backlight is coming through the petals of the columbine. It gives you nice separation from the background. It can be a pretty scene. It can be dramatic if the light's coming through and you got all these little fuzzies here. This one I wanted to talk a little bit more about. Again, we have some backlighting that's coming from the petals. We've got the fuzz that's showing up on the stem of the sunflower. And then I have another feature here, which happens to be the star sun. And I just want to mention that you can create these kinds of stars with plants or with other things, any kind of building, anything. If you want to create a star like that, it's not done with a filter. Basically, you're using a wide angle lens with a very tiny lens opening. So you don't want to have an f number that's like f2h. You want to have an f number that's like f22. You want a small lens opening. You want a wide angle lens because the wide angle lens, actually that f22 is smaller than you would have an f22 on a 600 millimeter lens. And you want to block the sun with something. And basically what I did was I kept moving back and forth until I'd see that star, and then I'd take the picture. And so I had a couple images with the star in slightly different places. But you can do that no matter what your subject might be to create that kind of star effect. This is not a garden exactly, but it's a beautiful garden spot. It's called Dolly Sods. It's a ridge in West Virginia. It's a high ridge. It was once it's semi-Arctic almost with its height, and it has a lot of blueberry and cranberry bushes growing there. And in the fall, they turn beautiful colors. They turn red. Uh, and if the sun is real low in the sky, and that's when I took this picture, those leaves will be backlit and it creates a nice effect. The downside of that is you've got to be real careful. When the sun is really low and coming directly into the lens, you can have problems with flare spots or a whitewash going across the picture. And I constantly would have that problem. The couple things you can do: number one, make sure you got a lens shade on, but that often with this particular situation isn't enough. You can have somebody kind of stand there and shade the front of your lens. I end up sometimes using a jacket and holding it up and over top of the lens where it's not in the scene, but it's shading the front of the lens. I've actually gone to the extent of taking an umbrella out and holding that up, the black umbrella, and holding it up when I wanted to do the scene. Or a black card could also maybe work, or stand in the shade. Here we have some backlight that shows, again, the nice fuzz on this lady slipper or moccasin flower. The problem I had with the flower was I had this nice lighting, but originally this part, the slipper part, was too shaded, and it wasn't really showing up. It wasn't showing its pink color. So I ended up using a white card, or a white, you can also use a white reflector to light up this portion of the slipper, so to even out the light. And you can get a variety of these reflectors. They're silver, white, and gold. And you can also get the diffusion ones like this. In the case of this columbine, this was in Shenandoah. It's funny, no, I take it back, it was in the Smokies, Great Smokies National Park. It wasn't quite enough. I had the nice black background and I had some light on the columbine, but it wasn't quite enough. So I ended up using that gold reflector that I just showed you before, and it warmed the colors and it gave a nice light on the columbine. And then you can work with silhouettes. This is cypress. This is in Norfolk Botanical Gardens. It's on the edge of the garden. It's a cypress swamp. If you're doing anything with silhouettes, what you need is a lit background with some color, but you need a recognizable subject without any detail. Well, you can see, if you're familiar with the area, you can see that it's probably a cypress knee here, and the pond. And you don't want the subject to blend in with any other non-lit areas. So if I had all the shadowing coming all the way across to here, you wouldn't see the tree. And you can go at different times and get different effects. I scout some of the places ahead of time to see what kind of light I like on the particular scene. This is Norfolk Botanical Gardens again, and I didn't like this. I liked the lines going up. It was kind of a cool picture with the tulips here, but I didn't like all the shadows. So I came back at a different time of the day and I ended up with this effect. And the shadows aren't a problem. In fact, they add some interest, and the flowers are lit. Simplicity is the key to high impact photos. Well, somebody had said if it doesn't add anything to the picture, just exclude it. You want to eliminate the unnecessary to control the viewer's eye. Difference between painting and photography is painting is additive, but we're doing something that's subtractive, getting rid of things. Ways to simplify: move closer and fill the frame with the subject. It's really important to determine what the subject is. Was it this whole big scene that this was in, or was it the structure here? Longer lenses help isolate and limit both. Number one, it helps isolate the flower. Also, it limits the background. One of the things that's interesting about longer lenses is that they have two things: a narrow angle of view and a shallower depth of field, which can be helpful in both of these cases. Long lenses, if you move just slightly, you can change the background significantly. So you can put it in shadow, or you can have it where the background's lit. So changing your angle is important. Reducing the depth of field. If you got too much depth of field, this background may show up. And if you're doing something in the house or someplace where you got control of things, you can certainly move the subject away from the background to get a background that's much blurred, out of focus, not distracting. Think before I push the shutter button, I come up to a flower, I say, that's a nice lily, it's interesting, and whatever else. What was interesting about it? Well, I really, what attracted me to it, I like that yellow. That's really unusual. So when you pick your subject, think about what's great about it, what's unusual about it, what might attract people. That yellow really pulls you into the photograph. But you've got to make some decisions. Do you want the whole lily? Then that's one thing. But what really attracted me to it was the center. Same thing here. I just love the gold against the blue, anthers, the pistil, and what do they call it? It's a style and stigma. Anyway, has this nice diagonal. This is people come, place gets crowded. This is Longwood Gardens. It's a Himalayan blue poppy, and it's rare. And so every year when they bloom, a lot of people come to the garden. But this is a different picture, a different viewpoint of the flower. It's not the whole flower. And then I have the little angel here by going in for the center. So pick out what in the flower you like. Here we've got some roses, and it's okay picture. But how about looking down into the rose and looking at all the swirls that you have and making a different picture than something like this. I also look at my plants lots of times. If they look like they're on their way out, I'm probably going to skip doing this one and I'll find another flower to work with. But I take a good look at them before I take the picture. Your rules of composition, they're guidelines, and that's it. You can ignore them if you've got a reason to. They can be helpful in other cases. Rule of thirds, divide the frame in thirds, horizontally and vertically, and put your main subjects at the intersection. I didn't do that here. Avoid centering subjects. Oh my, I did it here. Don't cut off portions of a subject. Oh yes, I did, and it's just fine. Later I'll show you how odd number of subjects often is preferred over even. It's usually less static, and I'll show you an instance where basically having two things divides the frame. And I like curves and diagonals, as I mentioned earlier, more than I do verticals and horizontals, but they can work too. So what was important with this, it was the center of the frame. It was the center of the flower. It almost looks like it's vibrating or exploding off the page. And it really pulls you into the picture. Sorry again. Again, it's centered. I don't care. It's the center of the flower that was the most important to me, and I like the picture just pulling the eye right into the yellow. It's perfect, and it being in the center doesn't bother me at all because it's the center of attention. With animals, I like to have room for where they're moving or looking. And I kind of do the same thing with flowers. If they open up in a certain direction, I like to leave more room in front than behind. And I do that with animals. If they're looking at a certain direction or moving in a certain direction, I want more room in front of where they're moving than behind where they are, at least in most cases. And there are exceptions to that as well. Here's your good example of, okay, we got two things, and that's nowhere near as interesting as that. So that little rule there, odd versus even, it worked here. Shooting the sunflowers, this is a much more interesting shot, plus the different phases of the sunflower I like a lot too, for interest in different sizes. And again, I like threes, I like uneven numbers, and I like the different directions that the flowers are going in. If you've got something with reflection, just try to catch the reflection. You don't want wind or moving water. And your best tool in your toolbox is your legs. If you locate a flower of interest, you want to explore all possible approaches. You may want to do something close. We'll look at that later where you've got a picture within a picture. But try different angles of view, maybe different lenses, different amounts of magnification, different lighting. You may have one flower and you can work it in a number of different ways. Refine your images. Do not set up your tripod until you decide what you're going to do. Lots of times the tripod ends up being, it inhibits your creativity, shall we say. It can be useful, and I'll tell you later, things it's useful for, but a lot of times it gets in the way. You can't use it in a lot of places, like Longwood Gardens. Right now, I don't like their policy unless you have some kind of special permission. They have a shoot and move policy where they get so crowded that they don't want you to take a long time to take the photograph, and that's not the kind of place that you want to go and get some great shots. Um, and if you'd start with the flower like I did with the sunflowers, and I just couldn't get a background I wanted and whatever else, I may go look for another flower, or I'm going to come back on another day, which I did, and I got the shot that I wanted of that sunflower. Looking up at things, going and picking different directions of approaching the subject. And I said I refine my images. I like bird of paradise. This is a horrible picture. The top one is a horrible picture of a bird of paradise. It's flat. It's not very interesting. It blends in with the background. I got a little bit better here. I've got more separation. I got a little more light on it, etc. It's separated from the background more. The background's probably further away. There's some improvement, but the one I really liked was where the light was coming through uh, through the bird of paradise with even a little droplet of water. I like the angles, etc. So look for that perfect flower. Move around if you're in a garden or whatever. Look in different areas. Longwood had these bird of paradises in a number of different places, and I finally found one that was in a place and with the lighting that I liked. And you can have a plant and you can take a picture this way, and then you can move around it and you can do that, or get one like that. But you can get variety from one type of subject. I mentioned I like diagonals and I like curves. They create a sense of motion. They're not as static. I really This is not an unusual, plant or whatever, but I saw all the different shades of pink going through here and the lighting, and so I took the picture of it as a nice abstract. We've got another one that's got a lot of diagonals and a lot of activity, and this one's kind of like bursting. Shadows can be your friend or they can be your enemy, and in this case, they were an active part of the composition. I saw the shadows, and those shadows against that background created an interesting pattern, so I stuck with it. And I do like diagonals. The two flowers on a diagonal. Soft light, nice pretty picture. Background shadowed. And I mentioned earlier about curves. This is a good example of a nice curved line, but I wanted to point this out. This has got a great background. It's at a distance away from the subject, and it allows you to be able to see that little ladybug on these little protrusions, little spines on the sisal. And another curve with the flower. Instead of having a stem that's straight up and down, that would be less interesting. And I love taking this picture from this angle because I got this beautiful circle. And agave plants can be real fun. I keep moving around them and keep looking for interesting lines and patterns. This reminds me of a basket of snakes. It's a very active picture. I like the curve. So I don't just shoot the flowers, I shoot other things that I'll find in a garden or in a conservatory or hothouse, wherever. And the background is certainly critical. I mentioned that with the little thistle there with the ladybug. Ways to spot some problems with your background. This is a little weird. I'm probably the only person maybe does this, but I'll get set up for my shot and I'll plan the angle and everything else, and I'll get it in focus. Okay, fine. And then I'm going to take it out of focus and I'm going to focus on the background and I'm going to start looking for problems. They may be serious problems that are going to be there when I refocus back on my subject, but they may not be. But it gives you a chance to see if there's something really dark, something leaving out of the frame, some really bright spot that when you go back and just look at the subject and refocus on the subject, you might not have seen it originally, but now that you've looked at that background more carefully, you'll spot some of the potential problems. Sometimes they're in the frame and sometimes they're just not. But for me, it's a good way to check things out. Sometimes squinting your eyes can help see uh, more shapes and things that could be issues. Make sure you take a good look at your viewfinder or in your playback mode and look for problems like those bright spots, dark shadows, specular highlights, or lines that are taking you out of the frame. One thing that's helpful in some of the newer cameras is focus peaking. At least the Nikon has this. What's in focus, it puts an outline around it, and you can pick the color or the outline according to whatever your subject happens to be, or whatever you favor. But it can be useful in making sure that everything that you have, that you want to have in focus is in focus. This is a horrible background. Um, I thought about it. I said, I like the flower, I like the curve, I liked everything about it, but I'm going to have to move. Maybe I'm going to have to get a little closer, or maybe magnify a little bit more. Longer lens will give me a narrower angle of view so I can exclude some of the stuff. And if I have to, in the software and the post processing, I can get rid of things. Nowadays, you can eliminate um, easily eliminate something that you don't want with some of the tools. Either you can clone over it or you can use a removal tool. And so I ended up with this instead of that. Just some things on softening the background. Lower F number will give you a shallow depth of field. Get close to the flower and pick a background that's very distant from it. Explore all your angles, high and low, and select a longer lens sometimes will, again, narrow angle of view will help you select a background that's better than maybe the original one that you saw. So maybe you took a wide angle lens and you see a lot around the flower, and then you go to something that's a little bit longer, or you have a zoom lens and you zoom out a little bit. You can see that if you shift your spot just a little bit in one direction or another direction, you can find a background that's much more suitable. After my initial planning is often when I mentioned that earlier, I set up the tripod, and I'll talk a little bit about tripods and features in a few minutes. Um, but tripods can help you have time to review the image, but they certainly can be awkward and difficult to get in place and get the framing that you really want with the picture. This is something that I've used. I've been doing some hummingbirds, and they're in with some cannon flowers, and there's leaves and stuff. And the hummingbird will come to certain flowers and there's things in the way. So I may use a clothespin to pull maybe a leaf a little bit out of the way, string, a little wire, but this is a little, it's called a plamp. You can get them that they hook onto your tripod. This one goes into the ground. Wimberley makes these. You can Google it. Uh, but you can maybe pull a stem out of the way. You can put your flower on it. Um, Main thing you don't want to do is to rip up the vegetation when you're doing these things. You want to be gentle. If the subject's real close to the background, you're going to end up with ick. So sometimes if you can't get a background that's suitable, go in tight on the flower. Here I've got a nice background behind this one. I like the pink against the green. I like the fact that we didn't have harsh lights, so we don't have a bunch of shine back here. This is a fun thing I like to do. I like to find subject that I can have in light, and yet the background behind it is shadow. Um, Sometimes you can fake it with a cloth, black cloth or something like that, that's non-reflective. But lots of times you can shift your position to get that spotlighting effect. And that's what I had with these as well. Depth of field is controlled by two things, your magnification and your f-stop. If I want both of these flowers sharp, I had to be careful. I had to pick an f-stop that gave me enough depth of field to get both of them. However, increasing my f-stop, I may have found out that no, I'm not getting both within my depth of field. Gee, what can I do? And one thing you can do is just say, okay, Depth of field is controlled by f-stop and magnification. If f-stop doesn't help, magnification is the problem. Back up. A lot of people don't think about this. If you back up and you have less magnification, you get more depth of field, and you can get possibly both your flowers in focus, and just crop when you actually do what your display of the flowers, however you want to do it, whether it's a print or whether it's PowerPoint or whatever. And you can see how magnification affects depth of field. This first image, I didn't magnify it a whole lot. We've got more of the petals showing. This one, I magnified a lot more, and I made sure that the part that I was interested in was sharp. But it just shows you the difference of how magnification, not just the f-stop, but the magnification affects your depth of field. In this case, I was careful to make sure these guys were sharp, but I took a good look at in my playback and whatever. I took a good look to make sure that the background was out of focus. And a lot of people have fun doing this, having an out of focus foreground, shooting through a hole, basically, where you have a blurred foreground and then your subject standing out and being framed. You want to be manually focusing on the flower, or you're going to have this not blurred, and you really want it blurred so that the flower stands out. I like doing patterns. If you're going to do a pattern, you want to make sure that all the flowers are equal distance from the face of the lens, and sometimes that's hard to find a set of flowers that fits that. Well, we kind of had it here. We have some interesting patterns here. The important thing is face of the lens has to be parallel to the surface here, or it's not all going to be in focus. And you can increase your depth of field a little bit by increasing your F number to a higher one. This one was just interesting because of that. I have a pattern, but I have a break in the pattern, and it makes for a more interesting picture. Sometimes you can have fun and just entirely change your point of view. You're thinking about these flowers, you're usually getting down low and shooting the flowers individually. But how about coming from above and using a little bit of a wide angle and shooting down on them? Just some variety. Just a little framing opportunity here with the flowers coming out of the woodwork. So I look everywhere for flowers. Two pictures, same flower. I, with my wildlife shots and with other shots, I'll often talk about the picture within a picture, but we've got the general overview, and then I went in tight. So keep trying to refine your images. Keep looking at your subject. If you've got an interesting subject, and find different ways that you can shoot it. This is just a quickie, but depth of, if you want to show distance in a scene, and depth, wide angle lenses are your best choice. Here I used a wide angle lens. I used a higher f-stop to take this picture. I've got some stepping stones for the eye, taking you back to this gazebo. Everything is sharp because I used an F number that was probably 16 or 22. In this case, I concentrated on the flowers and let the gazebo go out of focus. So it's just a very different picture than the other one. Creating your own backgrounds. Take a photo of a scene and make it out of focus. Turn your barrel and have a blurred image and take that picture. It's nice if it's not a uniform, totally all the same shade of green, and you can move your background around and get your subject against different sections of it, but it looks more natural. I took that picture, I took and had it printed, and I put it on a foam core backing. I had, this one was 11 by 14 that I could use. You can also do the same thing. You can take a picture that you got and then go into Lightroom or Photoshop and use a blur filter and create your own background, take a picture of it, have it printed, and have it put it on foam core or some other backing. And this guy happened to be in Longwood Gardens and happened to have his own version of that. And I did the same thing with a closer view. This is that Himalayan poppy. Think outside the box. These were just crazy. I happened to have these inside, and I decided I needed a background, and I wasn't finding a background inside that I liked. And then I took my computer monitor and I changed the colors in the background, and I use that as a background for the subject. It's just another way of doing things. This, I created the blur by doing several things. I took a picture of the flower sharp. I took a picture of the flower in a separate layer, and I used Gaussian blur on it, and I blurred it. Then I added a mask, and I took and blackened the center and black blocks, so it blocks this part of the scene, but allows the blur to show. So you end up with this kind of effect. Same thing here. So you can create some kind of interesting effects by doing that. This one, I just did a double exposure, and I'd used a filter in Photoshop that was a swirl, and combined the two in the double exposure kind of shot overlay. This, I love some of the filters. The liquefying filter is one of my favorite in Photoshop because you can get some really weird things with your subjects. Some of them very abstract and kind of cool. We can do this, and it's nicely framed and it's all cool, but you could also do this or that with this one. And this is a twirl filter. So you can have the flower, but you can take and change it. This is a result of multiple exposures. Basically, I had my 200mm lens. It has a collar on it. I'll show you that in a second. I picked a slow shutter speed. I loosened the collar. I rotated the camera while doing multiple exposures. And you just experiment until you get something that you like. I like that one. I liked that one. And this is what I meant by having a collar. You loosen the collar and you can rotate the camera, vertical, horizontal, anything in between, spin it to get the picture. So it's just a thought. And this is just a multiple exposure, except I zoomed the lens when I was doing it. So you can have funs with that. This is a little weird thing that I sometimes do. I'll take my lens and I'll set it to its closest focusing distance. I'll pick the lowest f number. In other words, it's wide open. It's got a narrow depth of field. And I will walk around with the lens and camera like that, and I will examine flowers and plants, and I will look for, and I'll move back and forth from it, and I'll get certain sections of it in focus, and I'll take the picture. And so I get some interesting abstracts by playing around with that. You can take a picture and move the camera with a slow shutter speed and get something different. You can zoom. You can do all sorts of things. I want to just talk about some of the accessories for close-up. The first thing I'm going to talk about is not exactly for close-up, but it's for that type of photography. The polarizer. The polarizer takes glare off the surface of water. Usually you think about using it to darken the sky and make the clouds stand out. It does take glare off the windows or rocks, etc. And if you have a subject where this background really had little particles of stuff floating in it, but by taking and using the polarizer, I darkened the water and you don't see those little particles. And I used a polarizer on this as well to create an interesting effect. So you can play around with it. If you have a scene like this, you want to make sure in terms of your exposures that you're not making your exposure be heavily affected by this dark area. So you want to take and spot meter if you can off the subject, put it on manual exposure settings, and that'll be just fine. Or you could spot meter off of it with some kind of auto, either aperture priority or auto ISO setting, and use your AEL lock to lock the exposure, and then back up and take the picture. Or, well, take the picture since you're spotting off of it. Otherwise, this black, if you don't do that, you don't just measure the flower itself and you just do the whole scene, you're going to wash out your flower because all this dark area, your camera, what the meter sees, it tries to make it midtone. And so it's going to lighten basically the dark area to make it sort of gray, and it's going to wash out your flower. in limited areas where you have, like indoors, you may not have a lot of light or in a heavy shade. This you all know. If you raise your ISO, you can end up with electronic noise, which we have here. And I just want to point out a couple things about it. It, of course, increases with higher ISOs. It's camera dependent. So if you have an older camera, doesn't have as good a processor, you'll find that higher ISOs are a problem. It is worse if you underexpose an image. You'll have more problems with this electronic noise. It is more evident in dark areas, but it can be resolved to some degree with different this is these are this is these two are this is a plug-in into either Photoshop or Lightroom. It's Topaz Denoise AI. Lightroom has a denoise feature, and I understand the DxO Pure Raw 5 is very good at taking out digital noise if you have a problem with it. Mirrorless cameras have a benefit in that usually they have image stabilization in both the camera and the lens that makes it easier to hold it. One of the things to think about is if you have a camera that you can move the LCD screen, if you got something low to the ground, you can be looking at raising the screen and be photographing using the image that's in the screen. In other words, you can pick your composition and all. You don't have to be laying belly flat on the ground. These are extension tubes. They go between the camera and the lens. They will not work with mirrorless lenses or mirrorless cameras because, well, the sensor is too close to the front. But you can use it with your DSLRs, your standard DSLRs. And what they do is they allow you to get closer to the subject and still be able to focus. The deeper it is, the you lose some light with it. So you just adjust your exposures accordingly. But I was disappointed I can't use that on the regular mirrorless cameras now. You can put a close-up filter on the front of your lens if you don't want to spend a whole lot of money doing flower photography. You can buy these sets of diopters or whatever, and they're not the sharpest things in the world, but who cares if you want a nice soft effect? They can work fairly well. Some of you may have an older zoom macro lens. It works okay. It has a function where you can turn it to a certain setting and it acts that it can focus closer to your subject and give you more magnification. You can use a teleconverter. If you have your regular lens and the image isn't big enough, you could put the teleconverter on and make it bigger. So that's something else to think about. But the true thing or the best option for taking macro photography shots and close shots of flowers and detail and so forth happens to be what they call macro lenses or micro Nikkor lenses. They're designed for high magnification. They come in different focal lengths. And he happens to be using one, so you're fairly close to the subject. They act like a normal lens, but you can get up to 1-to-1 reproduction ratio with a lot of them without using any kind of extension. So you can basically move in close to the flower and enlarge up to 1-to-1. They have less distortion than other options that you have. They're edge to edge sharp. They're great. Usually they're more expensive. And the one that you want to pick has to do with, number one, what you want to carry, and number two, how they work. Your shorter, like your 55, 60 macro, millimeter macro, will have a wider angle of view. You'll see more around the flower, and you'll be closer to it to get the magnification that you would get if you had a 100-millimeter lens. You'd be back further, you'd have more working distance from the subject and a narrower angle of view. And if you go to the 200, you have an even more working distance from the subject and even a narrower angle of view, so that shifting a little bit can change your composition a lot. Selecting the lens for the job. Wide-angle lenses you can certainly use for flowers. It emphasizes the foreground. I'm going to show you an example in a minute. Shows your environment, stretches distances, shrinks background objects, gives you a sense of depth. Telephotos isolate, magnify, compress distances. Give you a narrow angle of view, which I've already talked about. Enlarge background objects, which could be a problem if there's something in the background they don't want enlarged. But this happens to be a shot of a lotus with wide angle, excuse me, yeah, with a wide angle lens, smaller things in the background, exaggerated size of the lotus in the front. This was taken actually with a 600 mm lens because I couldn't get close to the flower. It was in the middle of a pond, and I really liked it, and I liked the angle, and I liked it against the sky. So you can use telephoto lenses for flowers. Um, I used a 200 mm macro lens on this because number one, I didn't want to, this has got a web, so I don't want to rattle the web. I don't want to disturb the spider. I'm not real keen on spiders anyhow. And I wanted to avoid my shadow falling on the subject. So 200 mm macro lenses work well because they give you more working distance from the subject for the same magnification. This is a wide angle lens with a little extension tube on it and gives you an entirely different view of that type of spider and gives you more of the environment. I laid down on my back and did this with a wide angle lens. And a wide angle lens for this, it wasn't about the flower so much as about all the different shapes in the sky. So you can have a nice field and you can do the flower separately, but then you can look at the scene differently, and all these nice triangles make this picture interesting. I mentioned tripods. It does allow you to use slower shutter speeds and have the camera more stable. You can focus a little bit more carefully if you're not hand holding and kind of moving back and forth. Sometimes your focus isn't, or your positioning isn't quite right. So it gives you more careful examination of your composition to make sure that there's not things at the edges of the frame or in the background that are a problem. Obviously, it gives you less fatigue because you're not hand holding the camera. But it can limit creativity and positioning of the camera, as I mentioned earlier. If it has a center post, anybody that raises a center post on a tripod usually decreases the stability of the tripod. So I prefer tripods without a center post or with one that reverses and you can actually mount the camera low. This tripod, I have pins that I can pull out and take it to a lower level. And that's a nice thing to look for if you're going to do a lot of flower photography and you want to get down low and you still want to use a tripod. Then one that'll allow you to get to a low level, it can be worthwhile. There's different ways of doing it depending on the particular tripod, but that's something to look for. If you're hand holding, he's trying to use his leg to help brace and stabilize the camera, or his knees here. He was using his arm. One of the things that can be real helpful is if you can rest the camera against something, like a pole, a tree, or whatever, rock, can help you stabilize the camera. And you don't want to leave the lens shade on while you're trying to do something like this. The phones have some great macro modes that iPhone does, and some of the other ones do, that you can do some wonderful flower photography with just an iPhone uh, or one of the other brands. Focus stacking is the last thing I'll mention, um, and it has to do with basically you're going to take a series of shots, and some of the new cameras have this built into them that you can do focus stacking within the camera automatically. You don't have to do it manually. And what it does is you basically are taking pictures at different points of focus. So you're going to start in the front, and then it's going to go a little further back, and it's going to go a little further back, etc. And you can get this instead of that. And the things that you want to keep in mind is you need a sturdy tripod, you need a still subject. You don't want to be moving the camera position or it's going to ruin it. You want consistent lighting, and you want to keep the exposure basically the same. And then you can process it either in Photoshop, these multiple images that you get. Align and blend is something you can use, or I used, there was a program called Helicon Focus. I don't do this much, but I happen to use this program, and it takes that whole series of pictures at all those different focusing points and puts them together, and it gives you, again, an image that's sharp from front to back. And you can do that with flowers, like this garden. Here, I used it outside. You can do it with landscapes. So it doesn't just have to be with a flower, where you want to get everything from front to back sharp. And going to say a larger F number isn't going to do it. You can do focus stacking where you take pictures at different distances from the camera. And with that, I'm going, oopsie, I'm going to go back again. I'm going to leave you with my website. And you can use this link this is recorded, this will be there, to sign up for my free newsletter. My YouTube channel has a lot on wildlife photography. That's my specialty. And there's a lot of tips. There's going to be, I think 12 different segments, about 10-minute segments. And with that, I'm going to open it up to questions.
Very
Mhm.
good. Thank you. It was interesting. A lot of stuff to remember.
Different, it's a kind of a different, maybe different flower kind of thing, but when you get into a garden or you get into a conservatory or whatever, there's lots to photograph other than just the flowers, and to get all the detail and try to refine your images. That's important.
I have a
Yes.
question. I have a question.
Sure.
What about using a prime lens instead of, if I don't have a macro and the wide angle lens can have its limitations. What about using a prime?
Well, prime, usually you think of prime, a single focal length versus a zoom.
Yeah.
Zoom lenses today are much sharper than they used to be. A lot of people for wildlife photography are using like a 100 to 400 zoom, and it's or 2 to 5, and they can be extremely sharp. Um, the well, zoom lenses can be heavier. They may not have as big an opening maximum aperture as a prime lens. Prime lenses were in the past considered to be the sharpest. Your prime lens will be fine. But some of the newer zooms, they're lighter weight than they used to be. That used to be an issue. They're sharper, more sharper edge to edge, although they may have a little failing around the edges, but that doesn't matter. But you don't have to have a macro lens. Some of those, if you're using a mirrorless or DSLR camera, which mirrorless or DSLR, is
There
it a
you go.
mirrorless or is it a
It's a mirrorless. It's a Canon
okay.
mirrorless. Yeah.
Okay. Putting Canon makes um a diopter filter that's multi-layer that you can screw into the front of your lens, and that can allow you to get closer to the flowers and still be able to photograph them. There's nothing wrong with a prime lens. It doesn't have to be a macro, but you can't get the magnification with it. Your close focusing distance is too far back to enlarge the image that much. That's why macro lenses allow you to get closer to the subject to be able to get that magnification that you need.
Yeah. I mean, I've had terrible problems using, trying to get close and nothing's good. The
Your
flower in the
close, your,
background. Yeah.
your
No,
close
Kathy,
focusing
Kathy has
distance.
some great floral images. I was going to throw a question in there. So I use sometime I do have a macro. It's a Tamron 90 millimeter macro on a full frame camera, but a lot of times I will use my Tamron 150 to 600 and just it has the ability to zoom in to where I can get within about 6 feet of it, but zoom way in, and I kind of use that sometimes as my macro lens. Is
And I
that
have I have done that before. I've got sunflowers from my girlfriend's house. Well, the dragonflies were done with, I think, it was done with a 400. It's a
right?
TC. It's got the built-in teleconverter. It's an expensive little thing. But I used the 400 on those dragonflies, and it looks like I moved in as close as I could.
Right.
Sometimes taking it out of autofocus and going, number one, a lot of lenses have, this may be something that'll help you, I don't know. Some lenses have a distance um limiter,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yep.
you can set it for distance, but you can also slide it for full, and full
Right.
gives you your closest focusing distance. And sometimes in the auto mode, I've found that if I manually focused, I could get a little bit closer. I don't know, that's a freaky thing with just one of those lenses, but also with my puffins, I just did some, and I did a stupid thing. And the 600 millimeter lens, it has a 13-foot maximum
Yep.
minimum focus distance, which is a little far for the puffins, which are about 8 inches tall. And sometimes the puffins were too were too close, and I'm finding myself backing up, and all of a sudden I realized I had the lens not set on full. I had it set on distance. So as soon as I set on full, I was able, at 13 feet, I was able to get them in focus. But I wasn't able to otherwise. So it was just a dumb mistake on my part. I just didn't notice it and didn't even think about it and found myself backing up. But if you have that on your lens, that can help you also.
So, so
Uh,
I, so in weighing on that, I do that oftentimes is exactly like what I said. 150, 600 millimeter lens, I can get within, I think on the full setting, I can get about 13, 14 feet away. But if I'm zoomed in at 600 feet or 600 millimeters, I've had this, like back when we used to have sunflowers out here and that 3 years ago or whatever, I could get really good shots. You can't go into the sunflower fields. They're private, but from the perimeter, I could get what looked like macro shots with a 600 millimeter lens, whereas I could not get that because we couldn't get right up to them
just,
with the
just like
macro.
that lotus that I got the picture of, the full lotus, that was a 600 millimeter lens. I couldn't get close to that lotus because it
Right.
was in the middle of a pond.
Yeah.
But I really liked it. I liked it against the sky. So it was a 600 millimeter lens that I took that lotus picture with.
Yeah. So I don't know if that helps you, Kathy, in terms of like focal length and what you can sort of get away with without a specific macro lens, but different ways to kind of get around that.
And then consider if the front element, I don't know how big the front element of the lens that you have is, but I know that Canon has a multi-layer close-up diopter that you can put on the
Okay.
front. You can
Just-
maybe you can get adapters for different size diameters of your lens. So that I have been told is very sharp.
Because it was interesting, you said not, you can't use extensions with a mirrorless.
Yes, I was very unhappy. I was also very unhappy. I had brilliant idea that I was going to use teleconverter with my macro, and I can't.
Well, I've
And
hit my Nikon D850, so it's yeah.
that's another thing. How about your teleconverter will get you closer? It'll get a bigger image. You might not get closer, but you get a bigger image of the subject. So if you've got that long lens and you got a 1.4 teleconverter with it, mirrorless teleconverters are great. Old teleconverters on the other cameras, 1.4 was okay. Doubler, with doubles the focal length of the lens, basically, were not very good. But nowadays, for instance, when I did the puffins, I took my 70 to 200 millimeter lens with me, and I had my 2x converter with me, and I could just pop that on. And converters can be very sharp with the new mirrorless lenses. So that's an option for you to make your image larger. Going from full frame to DX, you're just basically cropping. So I sometimes use DX anyhow because I like composing better, and I like being able to focus better. But yeah, teleconverter might be something that might help you.
I had a question for you. You're at the beginning, you had the water drop pictures with all and you get them all in focus and stuff. Any tips on that? I mean, I've
Keeping the lens
struggled with that one.
face of the lens is parallel to the surface that you've got. That's number one. In other words, you
Okay.
want to keep distance between. A lot of people say the sensor, the front of the lens. Just make sure that you're equal distance all the way around, and then I'd go to a higher f number to
Okay.
get more depth of field.
Okay. That's probably what it is. That's probably slightly angled and I could never
They're
hit it.
slightly angled, that'll mess it up. And that'll mess up any kind of pattern type thing. Even with the dragonflies, if I wanted all their features in focus, then I had to be parallel to all those features to keep them all in
Right.
focus. Because if you're magnifying a lot, you have very shallow depth of field. You can keep increasing your F number, but there's a limit to how much that can help.
Okay.
You can be down to the people that do the microscope stuff. Anyhow, you can be down to millimeters of depth of field when you're magnifying a whole lot.
Yeah.
And so you've got to be very careful with that angle.
And that's a good point because I notice, especially when I start using my macro lens, if you get a little bit off angle where you're not just like you
Mhm.
say, straight on where everything is in the same focal plane, you really even at like f16, f20 or something like that, you really quickly lose that depth of field. So if it depends on the importance of what you're trying to get, how do
And
you want you want to
right.
get selective focus or do you want to get everything in focus? But
And
you
two things control depth of field. It's f-stop, but when you run out of using the f-stop for it, it's magnification, and
Mhm.
sometimes back up and crop it.
Right.
Less
Right.
magnification, you have more depth of field, like I showed with the two, what was the lilies or whatever it was. Um, anyhow, and sometimes that saves you just doing the crop later because you keep your depth, you've got, it'll all be in focus
Mhm.
if you back up and then just crop it. It stays in focus. It's not like when you crop it, it's going to go out just because you're got a bigger picture.
Yeah.
Um, so it's all going to be sharp. So that's another trick that sometimes I'll use if I'm not confident that I'm going to get everything. It looks like I'm not going to get everything in focus, then back up some and use less magnification and then crop in the post.
Another question I had, you had one of the flowers that was white and you had a note on there that said, if you meter off the white, you're going to get gray, mid-gray, because that's what the meter does. So what do
Okay.
you suggest in that case where you have like a white flower and you want to make sure it stays white? What's your metering tip?
If you were metering it, okay, if it was white flower and the white flower was filling the frame, and I'd go, usually it's going to turn gray, right? That what
Hmm.
you meter off is going to turn gray. So what are you going to do? It's polar bear or whatever else. You're going to go plus. You're going to go plus one or two. You can add more
Okay.
light, one or two stops.
So
Um,
you'll just do exposure compensation then?
exposure compensation, right?
Okay, okay. I didn't know if
So
you had because you did the spot metering on some of the subjects, so I didn't know if you had another tip there.
With if it's a white flower and it's fully filling the frame, then now if it's a scene with a white flower, uh, then you probably want to go in the other direction. Okay, we've got a green grassy field. That's average. And we've got like a white bird or a white flower sitting on this green grassy field. Okay, we've got average there. That's your green grassy field. But your your dynamic range will not cover bright white and going all the way to black, bottom line. So in the case of the green grassy field with the white flower, you're going to go in the other direction. You're going to darken it a little to keep the detail in the white. So there's two different examples. One where the white flower is filling the frame. Okay, it's going to try to turn it gray, so you're going to lighten. The other instance is where you've got an average scene and you got the white flower in that average scene, you're going to start worrying about it being out over the edge of your dynamic range. And so you're going to have to darken it a little. And the grass is a little dark. Okay, no big deal, but you keep the detail in the flower. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes. Okay. Makes sense. Thank you. Any other questions from the folks online?
Yes, I got a question.
Yes, sir.
Yes, when you're using a diffuser out there, do you have a method on how do you hold it? Do you have it in your teeth when you're holding your camera? How do you have that diffuser?
If the camera's on the tripod, you're good.
Okay, yeah, I found the tripod, but usually we're not on the tripod. But how
Yeah,
would
then
do you
then
have
it
any
all
devices
right,
that you
like the plant, the thing I mentioned, plamp,
correct?
PLAMP. You can get one that'll hold the reflector. It'll hook to your tripod. Oh, you don't have a tripod. Never mind. Um, well, it'll allow you to hold the thing out there. It'll give you some extension. You may want to look at them as a possible, and I had a picture of the one, but they flex. You can flex it and kind of, so you might be able to, but you're doing no, I don't have any great ideas. If it's
I
not
will
on a
share.
tripod, prop it
I
on
will.
something sometimes.
I will share. I will share on my experiences. One is, and you hit it earlier. The tripod is really beneficial to being able to do that. Here's my solutions whenever I go out and do that, Carino. One is have a second person with you to hold that. Um, the second solution is because this often happens, right? Is you put your camera on a timer, you get your focus, you get everything set, you have it on a timer, like maybe a 5-second delay, and then I press the shutter and then I move my diffuser over to my subject to where it will.
But you're you're got the camera on tripod.
But I'm using a tripod, so the
Yeah,
tripod.
that took care of that. Yep.
Anyways, a tripod, but with the self timer. Give
Yeah,
yourself 5 seconds,
because if
however
you
long
got
you need,
if
5 seconds or 10 seconds.
right,
Uh,
if it's far away from you, you got the chance to run over there and get
correct,
it.
correct,
Right.
correct.
Right. If
Yeah,
it's close, it's not an issue.
right. Right.
Good idea.
Those are my, again, Irene can chime in on that, but she already
Or
gave right answers.
or cable release.
Yep.
Oh, there
Or
you go.
if you buy me breakfast, Carino, I'll go with you.
There you go.
All
Any
right.
other
Any other questions? I don't see any in the chat.
I didn't have
Great.
any questions. I was just saying that this was amazing. I've been doing a little bit more, I'll say, flower photography, and that I was part of a deal a few weeks ago in that up in Crested Butte, and had to kind of go through this and kind of learn a lot of this stuff on my own. But you covered a lot of things that I still didn't know. And what I really liked is like some of the things that I get challenged with sometimes is composition. When you come across a big, like you say, like a big garden or a botanic gardens or something like that, and there's just so many flowers around, and there's all these flowers all concentrated together and so forth. How do you find a composition? How do you do that? And I struggle sometimes with how do I find amongst all of this stuff the three, four, five, 10, whatever number it is, um, compositions that are going to make something interesting when I come back. And you did a really good job of like presenting on in terms of like angles of view. I struggle sometimes with, can I cut off part of this flower? Can I cut off some of this? And you showed here that
and
cutting off part of the subject actually really works in certain
moving
scenarios.
in close to it?
Right, 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 right. So sometimes I,
Okay,
'cause
so if there's a bunch of stuff around it, then go in
yep,
tight.
right,
Uh,
right, right. And that's a part of it that I get sometimes overwhelmed if I go to like one of these big gardens. It's like, there, just did this a few weeks ago. There's so much going on there. How can I find interesting subjects amongst all of what's around me in that? But the illustrations the descriptions you provided, the images you showed gave me some thoughts on when I go back to that field next time. I will do
and
things a little
finding
bit.
the feature about the flower that you really like.
Yeah.
Deciding I got a
Yeah,
flower, what's really spectacular about that flower, huh? Or, I like the fuzz around the edge. So let me think about what kind of lighting I need to show up the fuzz. I want backlighting and so forth. Deciding what about the subject that you like and attracted you to it is important.
yeah. And
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 there's
you had a couple of examples in there where you had the same flower, but you had three or four different angles of it, and every image looked completely different from one another. And that's now I know when I go out and do that, shoot all different angles, and a couple of them are going to work, a few of them might not, but
not like an animal that's going to run away.
yeah, that's right, right.
I try to refine my animal images too, but sometimes they don't stay there. So,
Yeah.
so that's an issue. But yeah, the flowers will stay there for you. And when the botanical gardens, when I was in Scandinavia, I wasn't too happy. I wanted orchids and none of the darn, all of the places that had a greenhouse, they didn't have the orchids. Either it was the wrong season or they're redoing the greenhouse or whatever else. And so I wasn't finding what I was looking for because I like orchids and I thought they'd have some exotic things. But anyhow, so it was like, okay, how are the leaves? I'm in a tropical area. What's cool about all the different colors in the leaves or the patterns in the leaves and so forth? So it forced me to look at other things when I'm in a garden other than just the flowers, because there's other interesting things there, maybe the bark. Um, so anyhow, just a thought.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
very
the
helpful.
last thing I was going to bring up is you brought up, and this is something I just learned fairly recently, is the power of using a diffuser in that. When you're out there, it's like, there's a time of the day when the soft light is there, and maybe there's some clouds, and that will help and so forth. But all of a sudden, it's like here comes the sun. It's beating down. The power of using a diffuser and getting it down close to your subject, especially if you're trying to get some of those macro shots,
And the
It's
diffuser's of different
amazing how
sizes
much
too. You
different.
get one that's a little guy, but you can also, that other thing was a big guy.
Yep, yep,
Um,
yep, yep. But it makes a huge difference. And you pointed that out. That was one of my questions, and you already had checked that one off with your discussion as the importance of using a diffuser when you're out there in, especially when the light starts getting bright.
I went crazy, and again, I was doing puffins in Newfoundland, and I prayed for semi-cloudy or semi-overcast days because they're black and white.
Hmm.
And you've got green grass behind them in a lot of cases, and the light's just too contrasted to get a decent shot. You really needed, either very early and half the time, well, yeah, very early in the morning. Lots of times I had fog that didn't help. But the bottom line was, I remember one of the days, my guys that were in the class are going, "Oh, this is great, great light and whatever." And I'm sitting there going, "Guys, it
Right.
is contrasty." And I'm sitting there going, "I'm not taking too many pictures right now because they're horrible." And you need that soft light. You can't, unfortunately, with critters and what, I can't control the weather. I just saw a program, the Nature Photographers Network or whatever it is, just had a program, and a guy that was doing seabirds and he was doing puffins, and he's got all these shots with, a silhouette with kind of sunlit behind them and whatever. And I'm sitting there going, well, I wasn't at Elliston the place where the puffins were too many times, but I never saw the sunset. It was always either clouded up, or I had fog at the end of the day or fog at the beginning of the day. And I never got this golden light that this guy got, but he spent time on the Shetlands, and he would camp for like 2 weeks or be out there for 2 months. And it's like, oh, that's a little different. I had maybe 3 different
Right.
days that I had a chance, and that was it. But anyway, yeah, soft light can help in many situations.
Well, I think it's a great presentation. Thanks so much for being flexible on changing the date. But this will be recorded, and I'll send you the link once I get it. It'll be on
I
our
agree
YouTube channel.
with that.
Any more questions from anybody else in the group?
I have a question. Okay.
Yes.
No, it's about the presentation. Is it too disturbing to have I didn't just deal with flowers, like it was all concentrating just on flowers. I did deal with, like, a couple garden scenes or stuff in the field and whatever else. Was that worthless to you, or
No,
was it?
helpful.
Yes. Yeah, it
Oh yeah,
added a lot of background.
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
because
Those,
yeah,
I
those are
worry
the
I
situations.
worry what people expect when it says flower. Well, I said garden and flower photography, but they expect, gardens outside, your garden outside your door, and flowers, and, you went to the florist and got some flowers, or you did go to a botanical garden, and throwing some of the other stuff in there. There's opportunities out there that you just walk out your door, and sometimes you've got something that's fantastic. So anyhow, and then also dealing with, okay, you got buds, you got seed
Yeah.
pods, you got all sorts of things that are in gardens. And I just was wondering whether you were thinking it was a waste of time.
No, helpful.
Okay,
No,
good.
I think
yeah,
It's-
those are all things when we go out to garden, in regards to like where the garden is and so forth. Those are all elements that become photo opportunities, right?
And most of them have ponds or reflecting pools. And I've gotten some great stuff just playing around with them. Okay, maybe it's, I can't get one of the things I want, but you can always find something else.
Yeah.
Mm,
No, those are the kind of places I think we all go to around here.
Okay.
yeah, we have a garden here. Well, a lot of gardens, but we have one garden, Hudson Gardens, which is free to go into. It's a smaller garden, but they've got lilies and ponds, and they've got some pretty interesting stuff. It's not huge, but it's fun to go to because you can walk in anytime. You don't have to pay.
Nurseries, nurseries.
Oh,
Go to,
nurseries.
There's
yeah,
another one, yeah.
there's
Yeah.
another one. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, Lily Ponds was a big nursery. Unfortunately, it went out of business just recently, but
Hmm.
it had all sorts of propagation ponds for lilies and lotus, and had terrestrial flower. Anyhow, the bottom line is some places that sell stuff uh and you may end up walking home with something. But they think you're potential customers anyhow. So sometimes, or they may want the pictures. You
Sure.
got
Yeah.
great shots, something. So that's another opportunity that, you know, It's free usually.
Mhm.
So
Home
just a
Depot
thought.
Different.
doesn't do it.
What's
And
that? Oh,
having said that,
Depot.
That's a good point too. You can have, I can see in my classes and whatever, I can have a bunch of people, not a bunch of people, but I can have people photographing the same place, and you look at all the different pictures and everybody's got their own style, their
Mhm.
own something about their pictures. They're usually all a little bit different, and you learn from each other, right? If you see somebody else's, oh, I didn't think about doing it that way. Oh yeah, that's
Mhm.
pretty cool. How
Right.
did you do that? Yeah. And so I learned from the people that were with me. I hadn't thought about one thing, and all of a sudden it was like slap in the face. Oh yeah, right. I could fix that. So yeah. Oh, I did a real stupid thing too. Also, try to get out and shoot as much as you can. I have a tendency when I have a lot of business work to do, the books, the whatever, the put the programs together and whatever else. And I don't get out of shooting as often. And so I found that I hadn't been out for like a month or two.
Mm.
And I did something really stupid. I picked up a camera that I hadn't been using. I'd been using the Z8 mostly. And I went out, and for the puffins, this was out on the water at Bonavista, and I was going to do whales and puffins. For the puffins, I took my 600 and I shot with the Z8, which is a lighter camera, and it's a lighter, and I handhold and whatever else. And I got some nice puffins in the water shot. And then I went to do the whales, and I picked up the other camera, and idiot me. Oh, I checked shutter speed and everything else and whatever. And I'm shooting on silent for, and I was shooting single.
Oh.
Oh, yeah.
I missed a
I
whole
think it's
bunch of great
it's the
shots.
it's the default setting.
Shooting on
So
single, no continuous autofocus, no 20
so
frames per second. I was shooting one frame at a time, holding the button down, thinking I'm getting a whole series of shots, and I'm getting like one. It was not, that was pretty awful.
You went
I
and looked at your account and you said, "Yeah, I took 10 pictures." Wait a minute, 10
yeah,
pictures.
what's wrong with you?
Yeah.
I know.
so
So
I
anyhow,
have I have the Nikon Z8 that now is about 2 weeks old, and so
Oh.
I'm
and I
getting
have
used
not
to
tried,
setting.
it's got something new on it too, and I haven't tried it with the new firmware. Somehow in the firmware you can, or in the, anyway, in your menus, you can set up distances, close
Yeah.
and I have not done anything with that. I haven't had time. I haven't been home all that long. I came home at like the end of July, and so I'm just catching up on business books and a lot of other things. Your show, I always try to improve on the program. I always redo my programs. They'll always be different. If you see this program next year, it'll have a bunch of different other things in it. So I'm constantly, crazy though I may be, I'm a perfectionist, and I tend to try to always redo things. I'll have an
Oh,
interesting newsletter. Get my newsletter. It'll have the puffins in it, and it'll have some information about puffins, but the
okay.
newsletter, the beginning of the newsletter will be the schedule. It's just a couple programs. And then the end of it will be puffin images, and it tells you about the puffins, but some of the things I think about at the end is some of the things I think about when I shoot, but just you might find it interesting.
Okay, great.
Place, and it was fun shooting them. But I did the whole end of the newsletter with, I do that lots of times. Either I'll do something on tips, or I'll do something on a location, and throw out a couple of ideas with the location information besides. But yeah, it's a whole series on puffins.
Oh,
Yeah.
great. That's very helpful because you just never know when you're going to go to Iceland or someplace, and it's helpful to have a.
Anything, anything you're shooting, you know, look looking at things differently. I look for behavior. Uh, I've tried to get, a variety. I like them fighting. They're billing. They do anyhow, and I pay a lot of attention to trying to get those kind of shots near the burrows and whatever else. So I try to get a lot of variety in terms of their behavior, but I do that with all my animals. If I'm shooting birds or whatever else, I'm trying to look for something different. Um, but that's my style. And other people have, the guy I just saw the program on with the puffins. He does a lot with very dark lighting. He had sun. He has sunrise, sunset. I never saw a sunrise, sunset. So he's got these nice silhouettes with this big sun behind, the shining water, it's red and whatever else. And I'm sitting there going, I didn't see that. Where I was, I didn't see that. He had some great stuff, but mine's a little different. But mine is, I concentrated on trying to get as many different behavior type things as I
Yeah,
could.
you got to work with what you got with Mother Nature, right?
That's right. She gives you what she's got, and usually you can make do with it. You
Yep.
just got to work with it. That's all. So
Oh
anyway,
yeah.
thanks so much for inviting me.
No,
Thank
very
you.
good. Thank you very much. We
Thank you.
appreciate your time,
Thank you.
and I think everybody got a lot out of it.
Thank you all. Have a
Thank
good
you.
You.
good
Yep.
evening.
Yes. Have a good evening. Everybody have a good evening, and we'll see everybody tomorrow night at the ACC show.
Great.
Yep.
All righty.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Night.